Disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast series do not represent the official positions of the United States military or any branch of the armed services. These stories are personal experiences, shared by individuals who have proudly served our country and are now pursuing new careers and business ventures in the Virginia Beach and surrounding areas. The insights provided are unique to the individuals and do not reflect the military as a whole.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children what it once was like in America when men were free.
Shop the new Freedom Capsule at bornprimitive.com.
From the front lines to the home front, these are the stories of courage, resilience, and transformation. This is more than a podcast. It's a journey through the lives of those who served our country, now serving their communities here in the Hampton Roads, Virginia area. We're diving deep into the heart of their stories, their challenges, their triumphs, and their second chapters. Experience their journey from military service to entrepreneurship to giving back. This is the Veteran Series, only on the Discover Virginia podcast.
So, Bear, thanks for having me at Born Primitive location here in Virginia Beach. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you today.
Well, we're glad to host you. Thanks for coming by.
Absolutely. I have to start with a pressing question, the most important question. Bear, what a cool name. What's the story there? Is there a story or inspiration
Nothing
behind
crazy. I got that when I was really little.
Okay.
I was like 2 or 3 and it just stuck. So
Gotcha.
Yeah, I was a little twerp. I think I grew into it a little bit. So, no cool, awesome story. I wish I could tell you.
Yeah, well, I mean, growing up in the Midwest, there's not a whole lot of bears out there. So
Yeah.
I can't imagine it originated from that kind of story.
Yeah,
but still,
exactly.
Nevertheless, very cool name. And I understand you grew up in the Midwest. How would you describe your time growing up, your family dynamic, and the values instilled to you as a child?
Yeah, I mean, Midwest values, so hard work. I think being a man of your word, shaking a man's hand, look him in the eye, that, this kind of traditional, more conservative values. And I was really lucky. I got to, witness my parents just work really hard at what they did. And it absolutely rubbed off on my brothers and I. And, that was kind of the expectation in the household. So, even from a young age, me and my brothers were mowing lawns and, kind of little entrepreneurs from the beginning, and, playing sports all the time. So you're always going, I was either mowing lawns, going to the weight room, or going to practice. That was pretty much my life. And we also lived on a lake. So water sports were thrown in there as well. So I was really fortunate to have, an upbringing like that. And I think a lot of the, things that we've been able to achieve today, can be, drawn from a lot of those values that were instilled early.
Absolutely. And just the old school adage of, sticking to your word, handshake is definitely something that, is not as popular in today's terms, but definitely something that holds a lot of weight and value. I feel, especially in our community and throughout Hampton Roads area as well. There's still that old school business like that that keeps things running smoothly. Now, Bear, I'm so fascinated. So you started your entrepreneurial journey at a lawn care business that you and your brother started. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, we each had kind of our own.
Okay.
I'm the youngest. I'm the youngest. So like, it was kind of one of those things that you were just, all right, that's just what we're doing. Right.
Yeah,
so I think when I was like in 6th grade, I started walking door to door with a lawnmower and a weed whacker around the neighborhood and just basically begging people to let me mow their lawn. And I think it was out of sympathy. I got my first couple lawns, $20 a lawn. And before you know it, I had like, 15 or 20 lawns, and every weekend, that's all I was doing when I wasn't at practice. So, ended up being a, good little business for a 15-year-old punk kid. Get outside is a push lawnmower. So you're working your legs, getting exercise, get out in the sun, get a tan, and then, everything's in cash. So, had a good little stash by my senior year that I was able to, give to my parents for my college education, which was cool.
Absolutely. And definitely, more on a minor scale of business, but still one that, I think kind of give you this outline or blueprint for your future businesses, which we'll talk about later. But I'm curious. So you played football and obviously were good at it because you ended up ended up playing for one of the most prestigious schools out there, Yale. I was curious, what was the training process like for you to becoming a football player with Yale University? And in what ways did you serve that, to really harness your sense of determination and athleticism for the sport?
Well, I think for Yale, it was a combination of, grades and obviously being able to play football. So I kind of knew, so my brother went to Yale. I knew when I was in high school kind of what the blueprint would be to get into a university like that. I knew I had to be like, top 10 in my class. So, I had 550 some students in my class, ended up being fifth. So I checked that box, took all the AP classes. So I was a little bit of a dork on the books because I knew I needed to get into Yale, right? To be competitive at a university like that. So I don't know where the motivation came from. It was just something I always kind of had a little chip on my shoulder, a little bit of an underdog mentality. So, late into the night, I'd be doing calculus homework, till midnight, going to bed, and then getting up at, 6 to go to football stuff or, any of the sports stuff. So, I don't know, I think probably came from my parents, but it was there. I definitely had that eye of the tiger. And I was determined that this is what we're doing. And then on the football front, I was kind of a late bloomer. So I really had to commit to the weight room and eating a lot. My sophomore year, I played a little bit of varsity, but I was 6'1", 130 pounds. So I was not big. I was like a, kind of a string bean. And then by my senior year, I was like 6'2", 210. So put a lot of time in the weight room, bigger, faster, stronger. So by the time I was a senior, I had the physical tools to, get violent on the football field. And that allowed me to get the opportunity to play at Division I level. So I think it was just the two-pronged attack of like, okay, I got to have good grades, but I also, of course, need to have the athletic ability. Because without football, I wouldn't have got in. There are people that, I think it's like 40 or 50% of people with perfect SAT scores don't get in. So a regular dude like me from Indiana, particularly with how I look, I'm not getting it. Yeah, they don't want guys like me unless I'm bringing something else to the table. And fortunately, I could tackle somebody. So that was my my unique offering to them in that moment. Yeah.
So in addition to your innate ability to crush opponents and to be physically fit and have that determination, I understand patriotism is your second nature to you as well, and that's most reflected in your brand now. When you were eligible to enlist in the military, had you decided which brand you wanted to be a part of yet, or which branch?
No, I don't know when the itch to do the Navy set in. All I remember is in 8th grade, I was 9/11 happened, and that's when I knew like 100% chance I'm joining the military. Like I'm not gonna, you're an 8th grader, so I was probably 14. That's the age where you're starting to get testosterone, and that's how an 8th grade boy reacts to an event like that. Is like, I want to get a rifle and go.
You want to take charge.
You know what I mean? Even though, I was 110 pounds probably at the time, so it's a little bit humorous. But that was the time when I decided, okay, I'm doing this, and I actually wanted to do it out of high school. I was talking to Navy recruiters, but then the football thing was really progressing, and my parents were kind of like, hey, you can go get an Ivy League education and play football, which will be fun for you. Why don't you go do that? And if you still want to do this crazy Navy thing, when you graduate, you can do it. Going into the SEAL teams, I don't know where that itch. I knew it was early on that's okay. If I'm going to do it, I want to be running with those guys. I knew very little about it other than it looks really hard and those guys look cool. So maybe let's go try that. Something
about Hell Week or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I eventually would go on to read some books and watch, there's like a Discovery Channel documentary, which is pretty cool, so for like a high school kid, it's super cool. You don't even get to see kind of behind the scenes. But I don't know when exactly that really took hold, but that was the plan. And I thought my parents had a reasonable offer of like, okay, that's fair. I can go play football and have some fun. And then, ultimately would do it once I graduated. But I actually worked for Redbull for 4 years before that. So I delayed it a little bit. I kind of got to this pivotal moment where I had to either, decide to do it or not. And I'm glad I made that decision to finally get after it.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned the Red Bull, part of your journey too, because that's one of the companies that for a lot of people, they drink Red Bull and they're like, it's not the most savory beverage out there, but it's definitely the most well-known as far as high octane, death-defying stunts. Is there a certain project or promotion that you worked alongside your team at Red Bull on that stands out to you as being a defining moment in your marketing journey, or at least your journey in discovering, how to brand and, promote a message?
Yes. I don't know if you remember the Red Bull Stratos project where they, Felix Baumgartner skydive from the stratosphere.
Do
you remember that?
Tell us about it.
So Red Bull is obviously known for pushing the limits, and they had this guy Felix, who was one of their athletes who had thousands of skydiving jumps and base jumps and all these things. And the idea came of like, what if we could jump from like a space capsule in the stratosphere, which I think is 128,000 feet above Earth, and I mean it basically looks like space. You're that high. And there was a guy that did this in the 70s. I believe it was the 70s. Basically, it was a research project for the Air Force for their like surveillance planes that would go super high to like 80,000 feet, like during the Cold War era.
All the space race stuff going on.
Yeah. So he was like a test dummy for them to see if like a pilot had to bail out at like 80,000 feet, could it be done? So this, and I think his name was Joe. I hope I'm getting it right. Joe, but he did it. He jumped from like 80,000 feet in like the 70s, or maybe I think it was 100,000 feet. It was somewhere up there, and he has the super rudimentary suit, yada yada yada. So Red Bull was like, I wonder if we could redo that, but go higher. So they brought Joe in as like the mentor of the project lead. Yeah. Right now, technology got way better, of course. NASA jumped on board because they're like, hey, this could actually be useful for us getting some research. If we have to have an astronaut bail out, like, is it even possible? What would that even look like?
Yeah.
So they got on board, helped with this, like the spacesuit and all that. So long story short, Felix went up to like 130,000 feet. They did a live broadcast on YouTube, and this was before like I think YouTube like live was big. And Red Bull had told YouTube, hey, like you're gonna need like the bandwidth to stream, like I don't know what they said. This is a guess, but like 10 million viewers. And sure. YouTube was like
a ridiculous number.
You're like you're crazy. Like we're gonna give you bandwidth for like 1 million views, right, or something. And Red Bull's like, no, you don't understand. This is gonna be like a monumental moment in like live media, right? Yeah. And so they did they're about to do it, and thank God the weather wasn't right, because they blew past like the viewers, like the amount of bandwidth. Sure. So they said, hey, we're going to roll this right 24 hours. We're going to do it again when the weather's right. So YouTube was able to get their shit together and in like up. So they did it. I think they broke all kinds of records. And one cool thing, this is the story I've told a lot of people. Felix did a test jump. I think it was like around 100,000 feet, right? It wasn't broadcasted. And at that high, you can already see the curvature of the earth, and you like basically feel like you're in space. And as he described it, when he jumped out of the capsule, for a second there, he thought he wasn't actually falling. He thought he was floating away into space. And he like, for a few seconds thought, did we calculate like gravity wrong at this high? Because the air is so thin up there and you're so far away from the earth, your perspective of earth isn't changing because you're so far away. So it's not like if you jump out of an airplane at 13,000 feet, you can kind of see.
You're going to feel going down.
One, you feel the air because the air's thicker, and you see people are getting, things on the ground are getting closer right as you float. But at 100,000 feet, you don't notice anything, right? So for a split second there, because he felt no wind, right? And the earth looks the same. He was like, am I floating away like it from earth? Yeah. And then obviously as he got going a little bit further and the air started to thicken, he's like, oh, I'm actually falling. Okay, good. So that was like his freak out moment on the test jump that they had not, he said, I had not taken into account how thin that air was. So that was cool. It was one of those things, but it's just, one of the many things they've done to kind of push the limits on conventional marketing. And I think I learned a lot from what they did and applied. Now, obviously, Born Primitive, I'm not doing it anywhere near on that scale, but I learned a lot about brand. And sure. That's a little bit more of that creative side and how to, instill the brand values and do things in a way that people pick up, almost as if like a brand is a person, right? And if the person has personality traits, how do you portray those traits to your consumers? And that's what Red Bull did really well. And then we've tried to do that with Born Primitive. Of course, our brand traits are much different, but we've been pretty consistent with it. And I think that's a lot of reason why we have a lot of loyal customers, because they kind of know how we roll, and we continue to kind of do things that reinforce those values.
Yeah, absolutely. And flashing back to that moment where you finished up with Red Bull and with Yale, and you decided Navy SEALs is still something I want to do. There seems to be this baseline of common traits amongst Navy SEALs. Having interviewed a couple here in the area recently, I've heard you on your podcast talk about this term extreme ownership, which made popular by, fellow Marines and Jocko. He kind of coined the term. And I'm curious if you believe that that's a trait that can be taught to anybody, or if that's something that someone has to be born with.
No, I think it definitely can be taught. I think it comes down to mentors, right? Especially young kids, they need to be taught that. And hopefully, if it's a young man, hopefully it's, football coaches and wrestling coaches and more alpha, tough love type guys that teach young men what it's like to be young men, right? Hey, when you shake that guy's hand, you look him in the eye, you don't give him some wet noodle handshake. If you give him your word, that matters. And hey, the world owes you nothing, right? So if you make a mistake, own it, and fix it, right? And I think we need more of that. I think the whole participation medals and this and that is really doing a disservice to our youth, because the world does not work that way. In business, if my business sucks and another business is good, that guy's not going to give me a part of his profits because, but you participated in business. No, you're going to get steamrolled, and you're going to, you know what I mean? So I think the extreme ownership, there needs to be more of a narrative in our society to reinforce that, particularly with our youth. Now, if you're 40 years old and you think the world owes you everything, you might be a lost cause unless you find a really good mentor that is really going to give you an honest, look at it. But I think it starts with our youth. And I think a lot of that, those values can be extracted in sports. It doesn't say you have to play sports to get those values, but that's where I learned it, on the football field, in the weight room. Hard-nosed coaches that cared a lot about us, but in the moment, as a young kid, you didn't realize it because you thought they were just being hard on you. And then once you grow up a little bit, you realize, that's the structure and mentorship I needed to become a young man. So then I can have those values. And now eventually it's going to be my turn to mold some 13-year-old kid who's still just a little punk and teach him some lessons and give him some tough love. And you know what I mean? So absolutely it can be instilled. I wish it was instilled more, because like I said, we are doing a disservice to our youth by painting this picture that the world does not work that way, that the world owes you something and you're entitled to this. You're not entitled to anything. You got to go out and get it. It just, that's not how I roll. I'm a father now. That is not how she's going to be taught. It'll be a good upbringing, but there's going to be lessons that will be taught that will arm her to be a resilient woman when she grows up. So
was there a defining moment for you, or perhaps a series of events that made you into the man, CEO, Navy SEAL, and now serial entrepreneur that you are today?
I think it all comes down to just, again, having good mentors. My parents instilled good values in us. And then I was fortunate, particularly with football. Again, a lot of hard-nosed dudes that just instilled the right values. And then eventually, before you realize it, you kind of become those. You kind of joke, you end up becoming your parents, right? With all these stupid things that we do. There's definitely some truth to that. So I think I was fortunate. Now, of course, I still had to take the initiative. It wasn't like it was given to me. I'm sure there's a lot of people that have mentors in their lives that don't, really take up those values. But I was really lucky. I gotta admit that.
Absolutely. So when did Virginia Beach enter the picture for you and your journey? And was it necessarily a choice to do Virginia Beach, or is it simply your next duty station?
Yeah, we kind of had the choice between San Diego and Virginia Beach when we were getting ready to graduate from training. At the time, Virginia Beach just felt like it would feel a little bit closer to like Indiana vibe than California. I mean, sure. I love San Diego. I every time I go back, I get nostalgic. It's an awesome place. I kind of had that 50-50 and I chose Virginia Beach. So I did actually get to choose it. And I'm glad I did. I love living here. I've been here since 2016.
Did you ever think you'd be building a life and a business here in Virginia Beach?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I knew, so the business, was already rocking and rolling by that time. We started in, 2014. I wouldn't say rocking and rolling. It was a couple years old by then. So we knew, we were kind of committed to it, and wherever I was going, the business was following. That's just how it was going to be. But I, came in here with really no expectations. I'd never even been here, when we moved out here. So I was married at the time. We showed up at 2:00 in the morning from driving all night, and we just walked into the house that Mallory, our co-founder, who I was married to, she bought the house. I hadn't even seen it yet. We walked in 2:00 in the morning. It's like, all right, cool, sounds good. So there wasn't a whole lot of planning. I was pretty busy in training and kind of let her run that piece. And she did have a say in the coast too. I actually was leaning San Diego, but she wanted Virginia Beach. And considering I made her move across the country for this Navy thing, I said, all right, you can make the final call. So that's how that worked.
Thank you, Mallory, for swinging Bear and Born Primitive in our direction of Virginia Beach. We are eternally grateful. And I understand literally right before you go into the Navy, you launch Born Primitive, correct?
Yeah, a couple months before.
And your co-founder, Mallory, noticed there was a little problem. And that was, you have to be able to speak to people when you're starting a business. And I know, was it sheer luck, or was it a certain will that you had to get lined up to be in the position that you were in, to have a phone at the start of your Navy career? Tell us more about that.
I've never been great with timing, right? I've always been kind of, hey, we'll figure it out on the fly. And this was a classic example, probably the biggest example in my life, because I think we incorporated Born Primitive in March of 2014, and I left for officer candidate school on June 10th of 2014. So not too much long, we didn't have a lot of time to figure it out. Yeah. Mallory was a full-time dental hygienist. So, she was doing pretty good. And, we had a really easy, simple life in Indiana, and I threw this thing on her lap. So she had to immediately kind of learn the ropes real fast, and she didn't really ask for that. And she killed it. She still kills it. She's an absolute savage. But when I got to OCS, one of the guys that was in the previous class had told me, hey, the only way to get your phone is to become the class leader. And they said on like the first day, like they'll raise their hand if you want to be a class leader, and they give you like a 60-second speech in front of all your peers to just like wing it, right? So I was like, all right, I got to go for it. Not because I want to be the class leader. Actually, that sounds awful, because I don't want to have to organize everything. It's gonna be stressful enough, but I need my phone at night to be able to like keep doing business. So
you just started a business.
I got up there, I gave him the quick spiel. I mean, of course, I have no idea what I said, but whatever I said worked. So I was like our class president or leader, and I got to keep my phone because you have to communicate with the drill instructor and the RDC to like coordinate your next thing, and you know what I mean. So at night, everyone would be shining their boots and prepping their stuff for the next day, and I'd be over by the window with 1 bar of service trying to get emails out. So did that for 12 weeks, and then same thing through SEAL training. Mallory and I were working CrossFit events on the weekend, so I'd be limping through the doorway on a Friday night after a full week of just getting my butt kicked, and she'd say, hey, we got to be in Anaheim tomorrow morning for a CrossFit event, to be like a vendor there. So we'd pack up the Jeep and be selling compression shorts from a card table. So again, timing wasn't my strength, but I think that's a lesson, that in anything in life, the timing, things are never going to be perfect. It's never going to be the perfect time to have a kid or get married or start your business or this and that. Like sometimes you just gotta do it. And then figure it out on the fly. So
yeah, it almost seems like the more information we have, a lot of times, the easier it is to overanalyze.
Totally.
And quite possibly have decision fatigue or end up just guessing because you're tired of trying to figure it out. So
absolutely.
Just trying to make it work. And I understand you spent your career 8 years as a Navy SEAL. Thank you for your service. And you served at multiple capacities and were exposed to many layers of our military, both the good and the bad. War can be a traumatizing thing as well as, for training for war in general. What have you done to sort of insulate yourself, or at least help yourself understand the things that you saw while on deployment and were exposed to while you were training for war?
Yeah. Well, first things first, I didn't see any war. I came in too late. The war had kind of winded down. So I definitely will never portray myself as this, badass guy that did all these cool things. Were we really capable? Yes, we were. Had we gotten the call, would we have been able to get the job done? I'm very confident in that, and I can say that with a clear conscience. But there's so many guys before me that have done way more cool things and have served their country in a much bigger capacity. The training, I think so many good kind of man lessons I took from the training that I think make me a much more well-rounded individual. I think there's definitely some potential flaws of we communicate in a very direct manner in the SEAL teams, and it can be a pretty alpha kind of hard-nosed environment. So I think the biggest thing is as you transition out, you got to kind of keep the good, but maybe shelve some of those ways, you know what I mean? That because in that environment, it works and it's needed and it's very efficient. But particularly running a company like this, I can't be speaking to my employees like I would speak to a SEAL teammate, right? You know what I mean? Sure. Because with him, that'd be totally fine. And he'd be speaking to me the same way. Here, you got people from all different types of backgrounds and this and that. So you got to kind of filter out the old way a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
Much like a tough, hard-nosed football coach wouldn't come in and, maybe speaking to his daughter the way he's speaking to his linebackers on the football field, right? It's a different conversation. So I think that's the biggest thing, but it was an incredible experience. I think the biggest thing I learned was just, I think 80% of the success in life is just surrounding yourself with the right caliber of people. And just like when I was at Yale, same thing in the SEAL teams, I felt like all of these people are so much better than me. It's making me a better man because just by being around them. And so just the guys are just the best guys you'd ever meet. And dedicated, just patriots, guys you can trust. And that was the honestly the biggest blessing for me. It was just humbling just to be around that. And I missed that part of it. I still, I still have a little seat at the table. I see guys, but I'm not at the table. I'm at the little kids table, like on Thanksgiving right now.
No longer class leader, just hanging out at the kids table.
I'm eating Cheetos at the little kids table now. So it's cool though. I still, stay in touch with those guys and I, wish them the best. They're doing great things.
Absolutely. And now I understand in the startup days of Born Primitive, you made a point to present your values in a few unique ways. One of which was when you were going to pitch for potential investors, you weren't necessarily buttoned up in a suit and tie, but rather wanted to portray, for example, your tattoos, your show patriotism. What was the thought process behind that decision? And did you find it gave you an edge in defining the most authentic brands to partner with that really aligned with your values?
Yeah, I think for me, from my optic, so a lot of brands that we compete with in apparel have raised, a couple of them have raised more than $100 million in capital since we started, right? We haven't raised any money in capital, right? So we haven't got institutional investors. We bootstrapped this whole thing. So I've always had a bit of a chip on my shoulder of like, hey, I'm making a joke here. I didn't need daddy's money to become successful. Yeah. This thing was in the garage for 5 years, took over the house. It was just Mallory and I for the first 6 years, yada, yada, yada. Whereas our counterparts were raising 5 million, raising 10 million, raising 20 million. The raises just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it was allowing them to obviously use that capital to go sponsor the biggest athletes and to sponsor the CrossFit games and all these things, which again, that's the game. So I don't fault them. At the time I wasn't versed enough to even know how to navigate that. So I have to admit, that's part of it. It's not like I was too proud. It's part of it. I didn't even know about that world, right?
Sure.
These people were more seasoned, older than me, weren't active duty in the military also, so they could focus full time. But what I've seen from a lot of those brands is it ends up changing the DNA of the brand, because what happens, you have these private equity groups that give you, hey, I'm going to give you $20 million. Well, guess what? Now they control the board. You now work for them. If I was the CEO and PE firm owned 60% of Born Primitive, they could fire me, right? So I'm going to have to do what they say, or I risk literally losing the job of the company I started. And that's what happens at these companies. You have the founders who are now like a 7% owner. It's like, yeah, dude, you work here. You work for them. And a lot of times these PE firms inject values into these organizations that are not, are values I would not embrace as an organization.
Right.
So I said, all right, to filter out those types of people, I want it to be very clear on day one when these guys come into this conference room right here and we speak to me, they know exactly who they're about to do business with. They're not getting more than 49%. So we'll make that clear right up front. And I'm still going to call the shots. And if you're not cool with that, and we're going to continue to do it the way we've always done it, we're always going to support our military and first responders. We're never going to be, we're always going to be proud of our country and what it stands for. We're never going to say the flag is a bad thing. All these things that I saw these other companies that were turning into because you had guys in suits from San Francisco now running their company.
Yeah. Then
we lose everything, right? And I don't care how much money they were going to give us. The pride part is more important to me than someone making me, be able to retire tomorrow. So that was apparent, but honestly, I think it gives us an edge because it's like we're playing with house money. It's like we don't need them, right? So we can go into those meetings and we don't have to be begging for their money. And we'll probably go. So we actually had a deal lined up, and they're great partners. They're actually still working with us. But it was at the time when the banks collapsed, and if you remember, Silicon Valley Bank collapsed, the debt market got really bad, and it was literally the worst kind of window of time to even make a PE deal. So the deal actually, we kind of parted ways on it. So we worked on that for about a year, and we had identified, and they're awesome partners. They still work with us. They're like consulting for us now. And the plan will be hopefully in about 2 years, we'll re-enter the process, or a little bit sooner. And we'll take the same approach. They're going to know exactly who they're working with when they walk into this room and they see me and they see obviously all the videos we put out. It will be crystal clear if they're gonna have a seat at the table with us. They will need to be on board with the values that will always be the foundation of our company. And that's great because it honestly filters a ton out, because they're going to say, oh, we want to come in and have this initiative and this initiative, and we're going to. No, that's not how we roll. That gives us an edge. Now, that's like a Black Rifle Coffee. They did the same thing. That's how they're a $2 billion company, right? Because they were unapologetic. They said, hey, listen, this is how we roll. If you like Starbucks, you probably ain't going to like us. You know what I mean? And it's cool. You don't have to be for everyone. And that's I don't think we've been as over the top as them, but similar like kind of vibe. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So,
That's a strong, unique value proposition. And being upfront, I can definitely see is a very strategic business move in the sense of how much time it saves you from those phone calls and interviews and like, just a year to, possibly network with somebody and get their funds, where you can share them a video of what you stand for, probably weed them out pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yep. So we'll see how the next one goes. Yeah. Hopefully we can close it. I'm ready to close the deal time around.
I bet. Bear, what's your go-to answer for when people like me ask you, what is CrossFit?
I mean, honestly, like I would just say it's a bunch of random workout movements that are randomly thrown together that are meant to, get you out of breath and in better shape. I don't train totally CrossFit now. I probably do 40 to 50% of my training is that, but that's kind of where I started in this the brand. It was kind of born in the CrossFit gym, but I would encourage it to anyone. I think it's a great way to get in shape. But also I think what's overlooked is you actually develop a really good relationships with the people at your gym. It becomes like a kind of a cool little friend crew, because typically the same people would go to the same class every day. There's usually 4:30, 5:30. You end up becoming buddies with the people that are always going to, like, for me, it was like the 5:30 class after work, right? You see all the same guys and girls there, and you sweat together and you go through the same challenge, and then afterwards you're all laying on the floor out of breath, and it over time develops cool little relationships.
It's a good community.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's the biggest benefit, and I think that's the secret sauce of CrossFit that the people that haven't tried it probably are missing out on. But beyond that, I think it's just a great way to get in shape. It's always different, and I think that's why people like it, because you just walk in and show up and you just do whatever you're told. Where a lot of people I think get stale in their workouts and they end up doing the same thing every week, and they get burned out, and it's, you know what I mean? It's like you never know what you're going to get. So
yeah, absolutely. Now, I understand there were multiple variables that adjusted the strategies you had when you were starting Born Primitive, including the name, to the CrossFit boom that you guys underwent, and the algorithms changing on social media, and of course COVID and the impacts that it affect all of our lives. What ways do you and your company stay ahead of the events changing the landscape when it comes to apparel, brand deals, and the supply and demand of the industry as a whole?
Yeah. Things are always changing. I think that is the biggest challenge, is you have to be ahead of those. Your tactics have to evolve, right? So things that we were doing 3 years ago on social media don't work anymore, right? So the short answer is just to be ready to adapt, and don't get complacent. As soon as you think you've figured it out, usually things are about to change. So very rarely are you riding this super comfortable, consistent wave of like, oh, we're on cruise control.
Yeah.
Part of COVID, we were on cruise control because like things got crazy for a while in a good way for online businesses. And that gave us a tailwind that actually caused us to get pretty complacent in a lot of areas. And then when we got the headwind more recently into 2022 and into 2023 with inflation, all these crazy things, businesses has had to get really dialed in, because a lot of businesses, aren't around anymore because of it. Yeah. So it was almost like, we had this big tailwind and everything's awesome. We're good at everything. And you have this false sense of like abilities. Yeah. Part of it, most of it was because the economy was injected with all this free capital that, it's like, if you're getting $2,000 a month that you didn't have before, and you don't have to pay your rent because the landlord legally can't evict you, and all of a sudden, let's do some online shopping. So it was like, you know what I mean? It's like fishing with dynamite, man. Like you're trying to sell these leggings, like those look awesome, And then it turned around. Now people are paying $8 for a gallon of milk, and gas was expensive, yada yada. Now selling an $80 pair of leggings becomes a lot harder. So you have to be much more dialed in how you're doing things, how you're spending your money, how you're spending marketing dollars, etc. So, but it's awesome because it's made us better. I mean, we're so much better than we were 2 years ago because we needed that kind of external pressure to really force us to change. But it's constant, right? So that's the short answer is like you just have to constantly be evolving. Part of it is we just have a lot of smart people in this building that are way smarter than me. And as a collective, we're all kind of have a finger on the pulse of what's going on, and we challenge each other, and there's always good ideas floating around in this room that keep the ball rolling.
Sure. That common theme that you've realized throughout your career and life is be around smarter people.
Yeah.
And
that's right.
It's part of the battle of humility.
If you're the smartest in the room or the fastest or the, whatever, find a new room. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Go join the Justice League.
Yeah, exactly.
I understand. As part of your adaptation to the market, you've partnered with multiple brands, voices and missions, all surrounding your core values of supporting the military community as well as first responders and those individuals. Is there a project that stands out to you as being one that propelled the company the most forward? And if so, in what ways?
Yeah, I think there's probably two. Probably the most successful kind of campaign we've ever done was actually in COVID. It was right after, everything it was like apocalyptic. There's no one on the roads. I remember driving down Great Neck going to work, and it was nuts. I was like, there's no car. I felt like I was in, an apocalypse movie. Because of course I was still going to work. I was like, screw this. I got work to do. I got to get down there. None of our employees, I think Mallory was maybe there that day too. And so we went into that time, and of course gyms were asked to close. Right. And, there was another guy in the space named Dave who, he owns a beverage company, and we were talking on the phone, and he was kind of saying, hey, what can we do to help the gyms? So we kind of hatched this idea of what if we do a profit sharing initiative where, like, for a limited amount of time, we allow gyms members to shop our site, and we'll give a kickback of profits to their affiliate, their gym affiliate.
Yeah.
So we launched it. We called it the Back the Gyms stimulus. And what we did is we pledged 50% of profits for 10 days. And we allowed any gym could go to a landing page we had set up on their site and nominate their gym, right? And it was like, there's no barrier to entry. If you're a gym, literally either the owner can do it or a member can do it. And they had to fill out the form, and it would auto generate them a promo code that then they could go use on the site for free shipping. And all sales that were attributed to those codes would then, account for the profits of that particular gym. And we had a little like Excel sheet that's okay, code this is CrossFit, whatever, in, Arkansas. And you know what I mean? So we had all that information saved, and then we started promoting it. And it just kind of took off like wildfire. We had a few thousand gyms sign up. And we were able to, by the end of it, donated over $200,000 to gyms in a pretty short period. And then we followed up the following month, and we did gift cards, because we called that Stay for May, because we were like, okay, this was a one-time thing. That doesn't help because they're still closed. So we called it Stay for May, and we got like 8 other brands to chip in. If you kept your membership through the month of May, and keep in mind at the time we thought this was going to be like a 4-week thing. Like, just don't cancel your membership. Just like wait one more month.
Till summer. Wait till summer.
We got like 7 or 8 other brands on board, and then on June 1st, if they were still a member, they all got a $25 gift card to all 8 brands. They got like $200 in gift cards. And it's meant to like dangle a carrot, you know what I mean? So the gym owner could be like, hey, if you guys keep your membership, all these cool brands are going to give you like $200 worth of stuff like at the end of the month. So that was pretty cool. So we ended up giving out over $2 million in gift cards at the end of May, which was cool. Yeah. But the gym owner, it was more the gym owners appreciated it. It was the government wasn't doing anything for them. So it was like, we're going to take it into our own hands. So I think that COVID response was pretty cool. And then I think the other biggest one is just our Veterans Day campaign. For the last few years, we donate 100% of profits for Veterans Day weekend to veteran charities. In the last 2 years, we've been able to donate $100,000. So we'll do it again this year. And then on June 1st, we're launching our limited edition D-Day shoe for the 80th anniversary of D-Day, at Normandy. And we are going to donate 100% of profits up to $50,000 from that shoe, which will be really cool. It's incredible. It's a dark green, black, like it's got a Band of Brothers vibe. And there'll be some limited edition ones that come with sand from Omaha Beach with it, and like a challenge coin. Wow. That we got permission from the government of France to take back 10 kilos of sand. So those will go in the limited edition one. So we try to do things like this that are a bit different, but allow us to leverage our platform to give back. I think it's one way to say, oh yeah, we support those who serve, and blah, blah. It's like, okay, what are you actually doing about it? And I think, me serving, of course, hopefully gives some credibility to that, but also, okay, now that we have a company, how can we use our kind of platform we now have to get people fired up to then support causes and make financial donations that way too. So Proud to say we're closing in on close to 2 million donated to date to those types of causes, which is pretty neat and we're not that big. I mean, we're not that big of a company. We're not American Express, you know what I mean? So we're not Visa.
But you're based in one of the best cities on the East Coast and quite frankly in the US. So we definitely have a unique advantage.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Would you say that Virginia Beach has given you a unique advantage, or are there any disadvantages to being on the East Coast, let's say, compared to the West Coast?
I think it's been fine. You know, I think there's advantages to being in some bigger cities, from like a talent standpoint. You know, if you live in San Diego or LA, like, and you're looking for like creative people or this and that, like they're everywhere.
It's just more people.
Where a lot of, you know, here it's a lot of like spouses that are like military spouses. Not to say it's all military, but the dynamic is a bit different. Now we've gotten really fortunate that we've been able to find a lot of really talented people in Virginia Beach. But they're much harder to find because there's just not many of them. Like, you know what I mean? All of those types of people are in like New York and LA and, you know, all these other places. So it's not exactly a hub for where one would consider like a ton of talent as far as what a brand would need. You know what I mean? But we've gotten really, I mean, we have some savages here. I mean, our creative team is awesome. Our marketing team, I mean, we have figured out a way around that. And I think it got easier as our brand became more known because then people were coming to us. Right. So if you were like a brand person and you were in Virginia Beach, it was like, oh, you should have Born Primitive. Like there, you know what I mean? Yeah. Whereas in the early days, you know, it's when it was still the garage days or the.
You want to meet you at your garage?
Yeah. Well, you know, we're doing interviews at a Panera Bread because we don't have that was I remember first interviews was a Panera Bread because we literally, it would have been our living room, which would have been weird. So, so it's gotten easier. But I mean, living in an active town with a big military community is awesome. It fits the brand so perfect. So I love it here. We're not going anywhere anytime soon. We're actually building a massive building down the street. Not as we speak, but we'll start breaking the ground hopefully here in a couple months.
Excellent. That was my next question. Okay. Any upcoming projects?
Yeah.
So a new building and
you see that diagram over there on the floor?
Yes.
So this building you're in right now, 6,000 square feet. This building will be closer to 60, 10 times the size. Wow. 35-foot ceilings. It'll be 167 yards long, so 1 2/3 football fields. It'll be massive. That'll house our headquarters for all the office personnel, and then it'll have in the center will be our distribution facility. For all of our day-to-day fulfillment, and then at the end we're going to have a corporate like in-house gym that'll have a wellness center, so saunas and cold tubs and the whole thing, and then we're going to have a showroom. As well, so people can come look at the gear and place online orders right there, and actually try stuff on and all that. So it'll be
very exciting.
Yeah, that'll be about 3,000 square feet. That'll be like our flagship showroom. So that'll be really cool. A lot of people are like, oh man, I need to try stuff on. It's like, okay, now you can come on down and see us.
Yeah.
And we're actually going to let them work out in the gym that day if they want to test the gear. And it'll be a 7,000 square foot workout facility where we're going to, as a company, we're going to T&E gear. And of course, that's where the employees can work out too. But we'll offer that to anyone local that comes in. It's, hey, you want to try those leggings out? Throw them on. And there's a beautiful 7,000 square foot gym right on the other wall that you go crazy and come back and tell us what you think. So
excited to see how that comes.
Yeah, it's going to be wild. And we're going to have a giant American flag on the roof. It's right over by where the F-18s fly, right on here on Virginia Beach Boulevard. It'll say worth defending next to the flag. And the O will be the Born Primitive logo, and that'll be 100 yards wide. So when the F-18s fly over, they're going to see that right below them, that was meant for them. No one else is, of course, going to see that. But I was like, that would be cool. So let's do it. Yeah, and city council was cool with it. So yeah, it's approved and ready to rock.
There you go.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. Wonderful. We are so excited to see that, Bear. And thank you for your time as we wrap up the conversation today, because I understand you have a lot of great projects going on. I'm curious, as a now father and, of course, former Navy SEAL, you put a lot of work into, developing the next generation. I'm curious, where do you think the world is headed, and what do you think the world could look like in the next 50 years?
Man, in this current moment, I'm not optimistic. I think we've lost our way. Again, I think tough love has been replaced with entitlement and poor me. And while, hey, that might work short term, the more people realize that they can go sit in the wagon instead of pull the wagon, the heavier the wagon's going to get. And little by little, those people that are actually pulling aren't going to pull anymore because they're going to say, what's the point? I'm going to go sit in the wagon too. And the wagon doesn't move. I think we're at a point right now in society where that's starting to happen. And it sucks because I think tough love is so necessary in the beginning because that molds a person and makes them resilient and have the tools to then go be successful on their own. And I see the opposite. It's like you are actually disarming these people from having the ability to go get it on their own, right? It's like they want people to think they're a victim. They want people to be dependent on it. Particularly, I hate to say it, the government. The government loves to have people depending on them. That's the whole point, right? And so I hate that because we don't need that. We're more resilient. We're tougher than we think. But from a young age, if you're fed a narrative that you're owed this and boo-hoo and here's your participation medal for 58th place, it does not set them up for success in the event that government safety net is somehow removed. It'll work. You can collect a government check your whole life and, in theory, make it work. But what happens if that goes away? You now can possess no life skills to take on the real harsh realities of life when had we at an early age instilled the right values. And you look at even gym classes in the 50s and 60s and 70s. I don't even know if they do gym class anymore. You know what I mean? There's no emphasis on doing hard things and physical fitness. And so as I feel like guys like me are going to become a little bit of a dinosaur because it's going to be this diluted, don't be too masculine. Don't be hard on them. And I don't know where that goes. I think there's a chance we can correct it as a country because it'll almost be like a counterculture to this wave of entitlement so I'm hopeful that maybe that will happen. I mean, there's been points in our history where we have corrected wrongdoings. And then you look back and you're like, do you remember that decade? You remember how dumb we all got when we look at the things we were arguing about in the 2020s? Holy crap. How was that the topic of conversation when we could have been worried about, veteran homelessness and these, there's so many bigger things I think we could be worried about. And I think there's a lot of people that are purposely distracting us. And I think, unfortunately, making us much more divided than we actually are as human beings if we were to sit down, have a cup of coffee and talk through some issues that maybe are very prevalent at the moment. And I blame both sides. I think I'm very fed up with our politicians and how they've made us so divided because I truly don't think we are, but I think they make a lot of money that way and it makes for good headlines on the media, right? So the media loves it because more people are then tuning into the breaking news. I saw something, I was at a seminar and CNN, I'm not calling it CNN because Fox does the same thing.
Sure.
In 1 week, you know how many breaking news headlines they had the entire week? It was over 100 in 7 days. Breaking news, breaking news, breaking news,
it's a
breaking
marketing
news.
Hook point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So I think we're a bit caught up in that cycle. So all I can say is I'm a father. I'm going to make sure that any youth that are around me, including my own daughter, are going to be taught the right way. And one thing that makes me optimistic, I hate to say it, that will make my daughter and any future children maybe that I have, or maybe high school kids that I mentor for football, whatever it ends up being. Yep. I hope to rub off them on a way that if they take those lessons, they will literally steamroll their competition because the generation they're going to grow up in is going to be a bunch of pansies. I hate to say it, but that's the truth. I already she's only 3 now. So I'm not able to instill that yet. But when she's at the age where we can start teaching lessons about being resilient and working your butt off, it's man, if I can get through to her, she's going to do very well because a lot of her peers will not be taught that because instead they're going to be given participation ribbons and all these other things. And that's not how we're going to roll. So long-winded answer, man. I'm not optimistic, but I hope we can turn things around. And I hope we can bring some common sense back into our society because I think we're wasting a lot of time on a lot of dumb stuff that doesn't deserve our attention. And we should be focusing on bigger things.
Bear, thank you so much for the conversation today. We really appreciate it. And if you've enjoyed that last bit, definitely go check out Bear's podcast, as well as everything Born Primitive has going on down in the comment section below. We'll have everything linked for you there. Bear, any final thoughts or any final messages you want to leave the audience?
No. I mean, I want to thank, anyone who's tuning in, those that have been following us for the years. It's been cool to see how, it's progressed. And, we got over 70 employees here in Virginia Beach now. So to come from the garage days has been really cool. And it's very encouraging, the messages we get of people appreciating kind of the values of who we are and that we always kind of stick to our guns. We're not for everyone, but hey, what you see is what you get. We are as advertised and we'll always be that way. So thanks. And, thanks for, having me on, I guess in our studio, but this is your show today, man.
It's a part of having those conversations as you alluded to earlier. Yeah. And then, personal question, Are you sick of drinking Coronas yet? Or
Coronas?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Oh, your work trip.
Oh yeah, from the Dominican Republic trip. Man, you did your homework. You really did your homework. Yeah, that was a few years ago. I think we drank like 500 Coronas in like 4 days. It was pretty funny.
Oh my goodness. Well, you could probably, all the breweries and distilleries here, you could probably get a good deal at your next facility, the grand opening.
We've toned it down quite a bit. I'm 36 now, so I don't really drink much anymore, but yeah, that was a good time. I had to go into town on a moped in the middle of Dominican Republic to get more money. So
yeah,
that's how quickly we
with your card and your knife. Right?
Exactly.
That's
exactly actually how it went. And I also shared my location just in case I got kidnapped. So that's true story.
Oh, great conversation, Bear. Thank you again.
All right, man. Thanks for having me.